As many of you know, I most recently lived in Minnesota, in Rochester, which is on the southern border of the state. This place was an hour and a half south of the Twin Cities, where the Minnesota state capitol resided. So I didn't get to go up to the state capitol too often, only for the most important of events. I did find myself going up there whenever the House and Senate were debating same-sex marriage. Whenever there was legislation being talked about regarding anti-bullying, I was able to take the youth group up to the state capitol to talk face-to-face with legislators about their own personal stories of experiencing bullying. As you know, our Oklahoma State Capitol is only 10 minutes away from this building, and laws and policies that impact human beings and other living creatures' everyday lives are decided upon within that building. The First Amendment to our country's Constitution ensures separation of church and state, and this is so that the government cannot mandate our religion or how we practice spirituality. But our practice of religion and spirituality is never separated from the powers that make life and death decisions over us. In Jesus' day, they did not have a separation of church and state as we do today. People were required to follow the laws that the religious people legislated. And what did Jesus do? He stood up to those who wielded power in unfair ways when they caused harm to God's creation. And for us to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, this includes standing up to power whenever it proposes to do harm. So engaging in the parts of politics which impact the quality of our lives is part of being a person of faith. For that reason, I feel blessed when on certain days I'm able to take 30 minutes out of my day and go bear witness at press conferences and rallies to speak to issues that impact the kingdom of God that we are trying to grow here in Oklahoma City. And so on September 2nd of this month, I attended a Voice press conference at the state capitol. Voice, if you do not know, stands for Voices Organized in Civic Engagement. It's a coalition of many congregations, some of which do not get along on other issues, but they have come together in this one circumstance. It involves worker unions and nonprofits. It involves people who have come together because they feel a deep sense of mission about pressures that affect Oklahoma families, and they find that they can all agree on certain things and have their voices together and speak to them and speak truth to power. So one such issue on September 2nd that Voice decided to address has to do with predatory payday loan lending practices, and I knew almost nothing about that before I attended this press conference. Here is a story that came out of Oklahoma City. A woman says, in 2010, my son went to work for Verizon in Phoenix, Arizona. About 6 months later, he found himself short of cash and went to a payday loan company for a short-term loan of $300. The agreement was that $450 was to be directly debited from his next paycheck. My son was let go from his job later that week and didn't realize that his final paycheck would not be directly deposited as usual. There were insufficient funds in his bank account, so the loan debit bounced, triggering penalty charges both at the loan company and at the bank. The check was bounced back and forth many times over the next week. We estimate the payday loan office resubmitted it twice a day, while my unsuspecting son was busy moving back to Oklahoma City. 10 days later, the bank charges were up to $600, and the payday loan shark listed penalties, interest, and principal of $300 loan at $600 as well. So that's $1,200 right there. We went to the bank to ask how we could make this endless cycle of bouncing the loan back and forth stop. The bank said they could accept $400 in cash to zero out the bill with them, and then they would put a stop on the bouncing for 30 days to give my son a little bit of time to settle up with the payday folks. And without my infusion of cash, there would have been no way for my son to have escaped from this spiraling debt, since even if he got a job immediately, he wouldn't have a paycheck big enough to pay everyone off at once. It became clear to me you that the loan company, and the bank for that matter, made windfall profits not only from excessive interest rates, but from the extra fees they are able to generate. At this press conference on September 2nd, there was a woman there who was 51 years old. She's a teacher, a single mom. She's the president of the Moore Teachers Association. And she said that she had a financial emergency. Her car tires were bald. And she needed a stopgap situation between her paychecks. So she went to a payday loan company. And what should have been a help became a major burden in her life. I had no idea that Oklahomans are the number 1 users of payday loans per capita in all of the United States. And last year, payday lenders charged Oklahomans $52 million in fees alone. And the average rate on loans is a 391 annual percentage rate. So speakers at this press conference spoke to the fact that they know of Oklahomans who have had to delay retirement for up to 5 years in order just to pay off this outrageous debt. The reason for the press conference that day was to advocate for reform of payday lending so that these businesses do not continue to take advantage of vulnerable persons in our state that need help instead of being used to make money off of. It was rather inspiring to sit and stand next to Catholics and Baptists and all these types of people that we don't always agree with when it comes to justice issues. And here we were all together lending our voices to one cause. So many people who have never visited a payday loan company or have never been in a financially vulnerable position might easily think, why don't those people just not go there? It's so easy to think that we know better than others when we've never walked a mile in their shoes before. But we didn't just stand at the Capitol and shake our fingers and complain about the problem. Every organization that was represented there vowed to bring this issue back to our own communities. And so on this Sunday, or next Sunday, all of these churches are talking about this issue and gathering our community together to make a difference in people's lives. So right after worship, when we go to our afterglow in the community hall, we have an opportunity to use our faith. We are able to write down our stories or our opinions or our urgings for payday loan reform. Some days, practicing our faith looks like studying our ancient and sacred texts. And some days, practicing our faith looks like meditation and prayer, which I believe makes a difference in our bodies and the persons around us and our world. Some days, practicing our faith looks like going to the usual food bank and helping the feed the hungry. And some days, practicing our faith looks like taking action towards social justice, because that's what Jesus modeled for us. Our lectionary gospel reading for today, about the lost sheep and the lost coin, is a parable that Jesus shares in response to others who are complaining about who he was spending his time with, and about how he was advocating on behalf of others who were in need. The text says that the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling. Those with more privilege were protesting under their breath that Jesus seemed to be spending his time unwisely, sharing his table fellowship with tax collectors and so-called sinners. But Jesus, attuned to their grumbling, tells a story about lost and found and joy. Have you ever had to search desperately for someone or something? Absolutely. Do you remember that feeling, that frantic feeling of losing someone or something that is irreplaceable? I know that we have. On the smallest of scales, when I was a freshman in high school, God had begun to gift me with poetry that was just coming through, and I couldn't write it down fast enough. And it felt so inspired, like a treasured possession to me. But a few days later, after I'd written down these poems, I couldn't find them anywhere. I tore apart my room looking for these scraps of paper. I felt like the householder in our text today, sweeping her house, carefully looking for her lost coin. After my room was torn asunder, I stopped and surrendered to God. And I said, please, God, help me to find these poems that you gave to me. And you know what happened? I never found them. But God helped me to find them again in a different way. I put pen to paper again, and God gave me the poems once more to write down. Because sometimes we find the things that we've lost in an unexpected way. Jesus' point to the Pharisees is that if you want to be part of something that is joyful and worthwhile, if you want to experience the angels rejoicing in heaven, then what you need to do is spend time and energy and money on recovering lives that have been lost. Bible commentator David Lewis notices in this text that there's far less attention on what has been lost, but on the person that is doing the finding. These stories are not really about a lost sheep or a lost coin. They're more about the person who goes looking for the sheep. In Jesus' time, this was a shepherd who stood at the very bottom of the socioeconomic ladder in first century Palestine. A shepherd who risks everything to go looking for one lost sheep. And this teaching was about a householder, about a woman who had only 10 silver coins to her name. Why did she only have 10 coins to her name? But she sweeps all night in order to find the one that was lost. These stories are reminders that God often works through ordinary people, like you and like me, to do the extraordinary work of helping to find the lost. On September 11th, 2001, 15 years ago today, Wells Crowther went to work like every other day at his job. He was an equities trader in the World Trade Center. After the second tower was hit, the one that he was in, Wells led everyone he could find down the steps to safety, and then he went back in to help find more. After leading more people to safety, he went back in again, and again, and again, until the tower collapsed. On that day, this talented, athletic, good-natured, but in so many ways ordinary person did an extraordinary thing, giving his life to make sure that others could live. On that day, God used Wells Crowther to find people who had instantly become lost. We don't always find ourselves in those kinds of extreme circumstances, but sometimes we do. No matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, God can use us to help find others. Whether we're at home or at work or at school or in our congregations or the places where we volunteer, God regularly uses us to help find the lost. This past Wednesday, I attended another press conference, but this one was not at the state capitol. It was here in this building. It was organized by Nathaniel Batchelder of the Peace House, and the state capitol and even the political representatives came to us. This press conference also followed the theme of Lost and Found. The Dakota Access Pipeline, which is already more than half completed, is a massive $3.7 billion project that would transport 470,000 barrels of oil a day across 4 states from the oil fields of North Dakota to southern Illinois. The project is financed by a Dallas, Texas-based company called Energy Transfer Partners. And on the morning of August 3rd, the Dallas company sent members of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe a 48-hour notice of construction on the Dakota Access Pipeline. Part of the pipeline would traverse the Sioux sacred ancestral lands and run under the Missouri River, the tribe's sole water source. Since then, people by the hundreds have been showing up on site to block the construction because an oil spill would permanently contaminate the reservation's water supply. And construction of the pipeline would destroy lands where many of their ancestors are buried. I heard this week someone liken this to what would we feel like here in Oklahoma if someone wanted to bulldoze our bombing memorial in order to put down a pipeline. We continue to hear reports from the tribe which tell the sad and repeated theme between the U.S. and indigenous people. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which has jurisdiction over the land, did not consult with them before granting Energy Transfer Partners a fast-track approval in July for this project. So far, according to the news, 250 federally recognized tribes are standing in solidarity. I heard that there are 566 federally recognized tribes, so 250 tribes standing in solidarity together is a big deal. They sent volunteers and supplies and logistical support to the estimated 3,000 to 4,000 people who are there at camp together. It almost resembles a small town. It's bigger than some small towns. They have a school, an emergency health clinic, and they're calling themselves protectors, not protesters, protectors of the water. One member of the tribe, Jolene Brown, said, "This is the first time in history that all of our tribes have ever stood together like this." You'd think that everyone would know about this story. It would be more than national news. Some people have heard about it, but I've heard many here who first learned about it on Facebook because it wasn't showing up on the nightly news. And I myself, after we had our press conference, I switched channels between all the channels for 5 o'clock, and for 6 o'clock, and for 10:30. I saw it once on one channel. And yet I watched all the other stories repeat on all the channels. And in my opinion, this one was very important and was not recognized. The purpose of having that press conference was to raise awareness of the issue and to build solidarity for the cause. So what has been lost? And what needs to be found in this situation is our awareness of the interdependence of all of life. How could we not realize that a contamination of water in North Dakota would not only impact the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, but also all of the land and creatures there? The Missouri River flows south, and we are south. And it's either going to bring clear and fresh water to us or contaminated and toxic water to us. And I've never ordered yet a 12-ounce oil drink at a restaurant. That's not what we drink to nourish ourselves. Being human, we've been created in ways that we do not run on fossil fuels. We're not machines. We were created by the divine in such a way that it is uncontaminated water that quenches our thirst and waters our fields and is home to all of the river and sea life. I learned so much by listening especially to our native speakers at this press conference. There was a woman named Casey Campornick of the Ponca Nation, and she spoke about how all of life is related, and thus all are relatives to us. And that human beings are not the top of the food chain as we learned in school. The food chain is a circle and we're just one spoke in that wheel. We've lost our understanding that what we do to each other and what we do to the environment, we end up doing to ourselves because we are all interconnected. And what remains to be seen is whether or not the shepherd among us will choose to leave everything behind and go looking for that lost dog, or whether the householder, poor woman sweeping, will sweep her house until she finds that lost treasure, that lost understanding that we are all interconnected. Jesus spent his time trying to help the lost become found. And God teaches us that even the most ordinary of people are used to salvage those who are at risk. So can we practice our faith in ways that would cause even the angels to sing and rejoice? May it be so.